My daughter and her husband flew business class to Paris on a Tuesday morning. I know because she posted a video of herself clinking champagne flutes with her husband at 30,000 feet, filtered in that warm, golden light she always used to make her life look like a magazine spread. The caption said, "Finally, our dream vacation. Just the three of us." She meant herself, her husband, and their 5-year-old daughter, Lily. She did not mean my grandson, Daniel. Daniel is 11. He has asthma, and when I saw that post, he had been alone in their house in Columbus for almost 18 hours with an empty refrigerator, a rescue inhaler that was nearly empty, and a note taped to the bathroom mirror that said, "Grandpa's number is on the fridge if you really need something. Don't bother the neighbors." Before I tell you how I flew to Paris and made my daughter famous in the worst possible way, let me tell you who I am. My name is Gerald. I am 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a detective with the Columbus Police Department. I retired 4 years ago, but the job never really leaves you. I know how to read a room. I know when someone is lying before the second word comes out of their mouth. And I know that the most dangerous predators are not strangers. They are the people who sit across from you at Thanksgiving dinner and smile while they are planning something you cannot imagine. I found out about Daniel the way I find out about most things. A gut feeling that would not let me sleep. My daughter, Karen, had called me the week before to tell me she and her husband, Brett, were taking Lily to Paris and Rome for 2 weeks. A belated anniversary trip, she said. I asked about Daniel. She said he was staying with a friend from school. I accepted that. I should not have. I know my grandson. He does not have friends from school. He is quiet and serious, and he reads thick novels that most adults would not finish. He has exactly 2 friends, and one of them moved to Phoenix last spring. At 2 in the morning on a Wednesday, I woke up and I could not explain why. It was not a dream. It was not a noise. It was that feeling I used to get on the job when a case was about to break wrong. I lay there in the dark for 20 minutes trying to ignore it. Then I picked up the phone and called Daniel's cell. It rang 4 times. Then he answered, "Grandpa." His voice was flat, careful. The voice of a child who has learned not to sound alarmed because sounding alarmed does not help him. "Hey, bud." I kept my voice easy. "Just checking in. How's it going at your friend's place?" There was a pause, a long one. "I'm not at Tyler's," he said finally. "I'm home." I sat up. "What do you mean you're home?" Mom said Tyler's mom called and canceled last minute. She said it was fine for me to stay here because Mrs. Patterson next door checks on me. "Daniel, she left Sunday, Grandpa." He said it the way you say something you've been carrying for too long, like setting down a bag of rocks. I was already out of bed. I did not call Karen. Not yet. If I called her, she would spin it. She would say Daniel was exaggerating, that she had made arrangements I didn't know about, that Mrs. Patterson was handling everything. Karen has always been able to arrange words the way a magician arranges cards. By the time she was done talking, I would feel like the unreasonable one for worrying. I had watched her do it to teachers, to principals, to her first husband when she wanted the divorce to go a certain way. She was very good at it. Instead, I got in my truck and drove 40 minutes to her house in Dublin. The porch light was off. The whole street had that settled, sleeping look, but Karen's house looked different from the others. It looked empty in the way that only a house with a child alone inside can look empty. There is something about that particular darkness that sets off something ancient in the back of the human brain. I used the spare key she had given me 2 Christmases ago for emergencies. I told myself this qualified. Daniel was in the living room. He was awake, sitting on the couch in the blue light of the television, wrapped in a blanket that was too thin for the chill the air conditioning had put in the room. He looked at me when I walked in and his face did something complicated. It was relief mixed with something else. The particular shame that children feel when the adults in their lives have failed them and they do not yet have the language to separate that shame from their own sense of worth. "Hey, bud," I said. "Hey, Grandpa." I sat down next to him. I looked at the coffee table. There was a wrapper from a sleeve of crackers, an empty juice box, and a jar of peanut butter with a spoon stuck in it. I looked at the kitchen. I could see from where I sat that the counter was bare. "When did you eat last?" I asked. "Lunch," he said. "There was some mac and cheese in the cabinet." I went to the kitchen. The refrigerator had a container of leftover rice that had gone gray at the edges, a half-empty bottle of ketchup, 3 beers, and a container of Greek yogurt with a sell-by date that had passed 4 days ago. The cabinets had a can of chicken soup, 2 packets of instant oatmeal, and a box of stale crackers. That was it. 2 weeks of food for an 11-year-old boy who needed 3 meals a day. I stood in that kitchen for a long moment. I had spent 3 decades looking at crime scenes. I knew what deliberate looked like versus accidental. Accidental is chaos. Deliberate is order. This refrigerator was orderly. It had been cleaned out before they left. The good food had been packed into a cooler and taken to Brett's mother's house, I would find out later, because they had asked her to watch the dog. The dog had been taken care of. Daniel had not. I made him the can of chicken soup. I sat with him while he ate. He ate fast, the focused, wordless eating of someone who has been rationing. I watched him, and I thought about the fact that my daughter had spent the last 6 months planning this trip. I had seen the travel insurance documents on her counter in January. I had seen the currency exchange confirmation in her email when she asked me to help her with something on her laptop. This trip had been planned since January, and Daniel had been living in this house since January, eating dinner at that table, doing homework in that room, being part of this family, or at least being present in it. "Are you feeling okay?" I asked. "Your inhaler?" "I'm okay." He patted his pocket. "I have it, but it's almost out." He looked at the table. "I didn't want to call you. Mom said to only call if it was really bad." "It is really bad, Daniel." I kept my voice steady. "You just didn't know it yet." I let him pack a bag. I told him to bring his school stuff, his books, whatever he needed. He was packed in 8 minutes. He did not ask many questions. He carried his bag to my truck and got in, and buckled his seatbelt and looked straight ahead. He was 11 years old, and he had the composure of a soldier. I drove him to my house. I made him a proper meal, eggs and toast and sliced fruit. He ate everything. I set him up in the guest room with clean sheets and a real blanket. I told him we were going to fix this. He nodded like he wasn't sure he believed me but wanted to. Then I went to my study and I started making calls. The first call was to my old partner from the department, a woman named June who now worked Family Services Liaison at CPD. I told her what I had found. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Gerald, I need you to document everything. Photos of the refrigerator, the note, the inhaler level, Daniel's physical state. Send them to me tonight." I did. The second call was harder. I called my daughter. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice thick with sleep and 6 hours of time difference. "Dad? It's 3 in the morning here." "I know," I said. "I'm sitting in your kitchen, or I was an hour ago. I've got Daniel with me." The pause that followed was short. Too short. Like she had been expecting this call. "Dad," she started, her voice shifting into that smooth, measured register she used for difficult conversations. "I know it probably looks concerning, but Mrs. Patterson has a key, and she was checking in every day. Karen. The note on the mirror says to call me if it's really bad. That is not childcare arrangements. That is a prayer and a post-it note." "He's 11, she said. "He's not a baby. He has asthma. There's no working rescue inhaler in that house. There's no food past tomorrow, and he's been alone since Sunday. Brett said he checked with his mother and she was going to stop by." "I am going to ask you one question," I said, "and I want you to think about it carefully before you answer. If something had happened to him, if he'd had an episode in the middle of the night and the inhaler had failed and he couldn't reach me and he was alone in that house, what would you have said at the hospital?" She didn't answer. "I want you to enjoy the rest of your trip," I said, "because when you land in Columbus, I will be waiting. And I won't be alone." I hung up. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my desk with a notepad and a cup of coffee that went cold, and I thought, this was what I had always done on a difficult case. Sit with it. Let it show me its shape. And what this situation was showing me was bigger than a mother who had made a bad decision under pressure. Karen did not make bad decisions under pressure. She made careful decisions after long deliberation, which meant this was not a mistake. It was a plan. I called my accountant in the morning. A man named Philip who had managed my finances since my wife passed 11 years ago. I asked him to pull the statements on the investment account I had set up for Daniel's future. It was not a large account. My wife had started it when Daniel was born, her first grandchild. She adored him. When she died, she left specific instructions in a handwritten note, not legally binding but morally absolute, that the account was for Daniel's education. I had honored that. I had added to it every year on his birthday. Philip called me back 40 minutes later. "Gerald," he said, and the way he said my name told me everything before the next word came. "There have been 4 withdrawals in the past 14 months, he said. 2 in the amount of $3,000 each, 1 for $8,000 and 1 for $15,000. Each withdrawal was approved with a co-signatory signature. The co-signer on record is Karen." I set down my coffee mug very carefully so I would not throw it. "She is listed as secondary trustee," Philip continued. "You added her 3 years ago when you were having your knee surgery. You wanted someone to have access in case you were incapacitated." "I know," I said. "I know. The total withdrawn is $29,000. Gerald, the account has $11,000 left in it. I thought about Daniel's college fund shrinking by $29,000 while my daughter flew business class to Europe. I thought about that carefully. I thought about what $29,000 looks like to a couple buying business class tickets and Paris hotel rooms and a travel wardrobe and restaurant reservations at places that require them months in advance. I thought about Daniel eating crackers and peanut butter alone in a cold house. I asked Philip to prepare a complete statement of all activity on the account. I asked him to email it to my attorney, a woman named Carol Beeman, who had been my wife's attorney and had become mine by inheritance and trust. Carol called me that afternoon. She was 64 years old and had the personality of a surgical instrument, precise, cold when it needed to be, and incapable of being distracted by emotion. "Gerald," she said, "your daughter has committed breach of fiduciary duty. Potentially fraud, depending on what the withdrawals were used for. Do you want to pursue this?" "I want to pursue everything," I said. "But first, I need to go get my grandson properly. Because here is the thing I had not told Carol yet. Daniel's legal situation was complicated. After Karen's first marriage ended, Daniel's biological father had signed away his parental rights in exchange for a clean financial separation. It was one of the worst trades a man can make, and Daniel's father had made it when Daniel was 4 years old. Since then, Daniel had lived as Karen's son, and after she married Brett had become his stepfather on paper, his legal guardian, which meant that technically, I had removed a child from his legal guardian's home without permission. I needed to fix that before Karen landed. Carol filed an emergency petition for temporary guardianship, citing abandonment and endangerment. June from Family Services submitted her own documentation. The hearing was scheduled for the same afternoon Karen's flight landed at Port Columbus. I did not call Karen to tell her about the hearing. I did not call Brett. I let them land. I let them collect their luggage. I let them take a rideshare home, pull up to their quiet house in Dublin, and walk into a building that was cleaner and emptier than they'd left it. And then I let Carol's office call Brett's cell number. What happened next I only know from what Daniel told me, and from what I saw on the security footage from the Family Services building where the hearing was held. Karen and Brett arrived 20 minutes after the hearing started. They walked in looking like people who had just stepped off a very long flight and had not been told why they were there. Brett was wearing a linen blazer that still had the European city creased into it. Karen had her hair pulled back and she was wearing sunglasses inside, which is something people do when they have been crying on a plane or when they do not want anyone to read their eyes. Carol had briefed the judge. Daniel's pediatrician had submitted a letter about the asthma management requirements. The photos I had taken of the refrigerator and the note were entered into the record. Karen sat down at the respondent's table and took off her sunglasses. She looked at me across the room. She looked at me the way you look at someone you thought you knew, and have just realized you only knew the version of them that let you get away with things. "Dad," she said. Her voice was very quiet. Just Dad, like the word itself was supposed to do something. It did not do anything. The judge was a man named Harrison, who had the face of someone who had stopped being surprised by human behavior several decades ago. He looked at the documentation. He asked Karen 3 questions. Did she know Daniel had been left without adequate food? She said she believed arrangements had been made. Did she know the rescue inhaler was nearly empty? She said she thought there was a spare. Did she know about the 4 withdrawals from the educational trust account? And that was the moment Karen's composure cracked. She looked at Brett. Brett looked at the table in front of him. It was a specific kind of silence. The silence of someone who has just realized that the story they agreed on beforehand does not cover this particular question. I am not sure what my husband, Karen started. Your signature is on the withdrawal authorizations, Carol said from beside me. As co-trustee, the fiduciary responsibility is yours. Those funds were used for household expenses, Brett said. His voice was level and rehearsed. We hit a rough patch last year. Medical bills. The roof. I looked at Brett. I had never liked him. I had never said that out loud, not even to my wife's memory when I talked to her photograph late at night. But I had known from the first year of their marriage that he was a man who experienced other people primarily as resources. He did not love Karen. He managed her. He appreciated her income, her house, her family connections, her agreeable mother-in-law who had been too grief-stricken after losing her husband to pay close attention to how money moved. Brett, I said, the roof was replaced under the home warranty. I know because I was there when the contractor came. In March of 2 years ago. Brett looked at me. His jaw tightened. And I pulled Daniel's medical records, Carol added. His only hospitalization in the last year was a routine follow-up. There were no significant medical bills. Judge Harrison set down the documents. He folded his hands. He looked at Karen with an expression that was not cruel but was very far from kind. Mrs. Weston, he said, using her married name. I am going to ask you something directly, and I need you to answer me directly. Did you leave your 11-year-old son with a chronic respiratory condition alone in your home for 2 weeks while you traveled internationally? Karen opened her mouth. Then she closed it. Then she said, I thought arrangements had been made. By whom? She did not answer. Judge Harrison granted me temporary guardianship effective immediately. He ordered a full financial audit of the trust account and froze Karen's co-trustee access. He scheduled a follow-up hearing for 30 days later and ordered Karen and Brett to submit to a home evaluation before Daniel could be returned to their care. Karen did not scream. She was not the screaming type. She stood up slowly and she put her sunglasses back on and she walked to the door. Brett followed her. At the door, she turned and looked at me. You are going to regret this, she said. I have regretted a lot of things in my life, Karen. I said it quietly, so only she could hear. I regret not seeing this sooner. I don't regret seeing it now. The door closed behind them. In the weeks that followed, Daniel lived with me. He slept in the guest room and slowly made it his own. He put a poster on the wall. He started leaving his shoes by the front door instead of carrying them everywhere like he was always ready to be told to leave. I watched that transformation the way you watch a plant in a dark corner when you finally move it to the window. It is not dramatic. It is quiet. It happens between moments you notice. He ate breakfast every morning. He did not check the refrigerator the way Mia had checked hers, opening it and closing it to confirm permission. He simply opened it and took what he needed. And the normalcy of that small act made me feel something I had not expected. It made me feel like I had done something right. The financial audit came back 6 weeks later. Carol walked me through it on a Thursday evening at my kitchen table with 2 cups of tea neither of us touched. The $29,000 from the trust had not gone to household expenses or medical bills or a new roof. $12,000 had gone to credit card debt in Brett's name. Debt accumulated before the marriage that Karen may not have known existed. $11,000 had been transferred to an investment brokerage account in Brett's name alone, and $6,000 had funded the European trip, the trip that had been marketed to me as an anniversary celebration. He used Daniel's college fund to pay his old gambling debts and buy European hotel rooms, Carol said. She said it with the flat clarity of someone reading from a ledger, which she was. I sat with that for a moment. How much of this did Karen know? I asked. Carol set down the page. Enough, she said. Maybe not the full architecture of it, but enough to sign the paperwork and not ask where the money was going. The law doesn't distinguish between active fraud and willful ignorance when you're the co-signatory. I want to recover the full amount, I said. Whatever legal avenue exists, I want to pursue it. There is a civil path, Carol said. It is not fast, but Brett's brokerage account is frozen pending the audit findings. We can file a claim against those assets. Given Daniel's status as the trust beneficiary, the claim is strong. What about criminal charges? That depends on the DA. Carol straightened the pages. I have already been in contact with the Financial Crimes Unit. They are reviewing it. When does Daniel find out? She was quiet for a moment. That is up to you. I waited until the next weekend. We were sitting on the back porch after dinner, the two of us, watching the light change over the yard. Daniel was reading, but not with full attention. He kept looking up at the trees. Grandpa, he said at one point, do you think Mom knew that I was alone? I thought about the careful way he had asked it. Not did she know, but do you think he was giving me room to soften it if I needed to? I think, I said slowly, that your mother loves you. I believe that genuinely, but I also think she made a series of choices that she told herself were fine. And the problem with telling yourself something is fine is that it doesn't change whether it actually is. He thought about that. Then he said, Brett didn't want me to go. I looked at him. On the trip. I heard them arguing about it in January. Mom wanted to bring me. Brett said it was too expensive and that I'd be bored. He said I could stay with Tyler. He said Tyler's family agreed to take you? Daniel shrugged. He said he'd handle it. He looked down at his book. I guess he didn't. I filed that information. I filed it in the part of my brain where I kept the pieces that completed a picture. The 30-day hearing was held on a Tuesday morning with both parties present. Karen came without Brett. She sat alone at her table with an attorney I had not seen before, a sharp woman in a charcoal suit who looked like she had been hired very recently. Karen had cut her hair since the first hearing. She looked smaller without it. Or maybe she had simply lost the architecture of a person who was performing contentment. She did not look at me when I walked in. She looked at Daniel, who sat beside me. He looked back at her, and what passed between them was something I could not fully read. The complicated language of a mother and child who have hurt each other in ways that cannot be footnoted. The judge reviewed the audit findings. He reviewed the family services evaluation of my home. He reviewed Daniel's school attendance records, which showed his grades had improved by a full letter since he moved in with me. He reviewed a psychological assessment by a child therapist named Dr. Rao, who had been meeting with Daniel twice a week. Dr. Rao's report noted that Daniel showed significant signs of emotional parentification, meaning he had spent a substantial portion of his childhood managing his own emotional needs and carefully monitoring the emotional climate of the adults around him in order to avoid conflict. She noted that he had developed a minimizing pattern, downplaying his own needs to avoid being perceived as a burden. She described this as a learned adaptation to chronic emotional neglect. I watched Karen's face while the judge read that section aloud. Her attorney put a hand briefly on her arm. Karen did not move. She sat very still, the way a person sits when they are experiencing something they cannot argue with. I have reviewed all submitted materials, Judge Harrison said. I am prepared to formalize the guardianship arrangement. He looked at Karen. Mrs. Weston, you are not a monster. That is not what this record shows me. What it shows me is a woman who made herself comfortable with choices she knew were wrong because confronting them was harder than avoiding them. That comfort cost your son. I need you to understand that. Karen nodded. Her eyes were wet, but she did not let them spill. I am granting Mr. Gerald Marsh permanent legal guardianship of Daniel Marsh, the judge continued. The parental rights are not terminated at this time, but contact will be supervised and contingent on Mrs. Weston's completion of a family therapy program and the ongoing resolution of the financial case involving the trust account. Karen's attorney stood. My client would like to address the court. Judge Harrison nodded. Karen stood up. She held a single index card in her hand, but she did not look at it. She looked at Daniel. I want you to know, she said. Her voice was uneven but controlled. I am not going to stand here and tell you that I didn't know. I knew you were alone. I told myself it would be fine. I told myself you were old enough. I told myself Brett had made arrangements. But the truth is, I told myself all of that because I did not want to fight with Brett again. And that was wrong. It was wrong, and I'm sorry. Daniel was very still. I don't know if you'll forgive me, Karen said. That's not something I can ask for right now. But I want you to know that I see it. I see what I did. She sat down. The judge concluded the hearing. I put my hand on Daniel's shoulder as we walked out. He was quiet until we got to the parking lot, where the April air was bright and a little cold and the trees along the courthouse road were just beginning to open. "Do you believe her?" he asked. "I think she meant it," I said. "Whether she can hold to it is a different question. That part takes time." He nodded. He squinted into the sun. "Can we get lunch?" "We can get anything you want." "Can we get those sandwiches from the place by the river? The Reuben place?" "Yeah." He almost smiled. "I've been thinking about it for like 3 weeks." "Let's go," I said. We drove to the river. We got the sandwiches, and we ate them at a picnic table by the water, and Daniel talked about a book he was reading and a science project he wanted to work on that involved weather patterns, and I listened to every word of it like it was the most important briefing I had ever attended. Brett was indicted 8 weeks later, on 1 count of wire fraud and 2 counts of breach of fiduciary duty. The case was handled by the DA's office in conjunction with the Financial Crimes Unit. He pled guilty to reduced charges in exchange for full restitution to the trust account plus interest. He was sentenced to 18 months of probation, mandatory financial counseling, and community service. He and Karen separated 3 months after the indictment. The divorce was filed in the fall. I did not celebrate any of that. I noted it. I filed it as a closed case. What I celebrated was smaller. I celebrated the afternoon Daniel came home from school and went straight to the kitchen and made himself a snack without asking permission or apologizing for it. I celebrated the night he stayed up past his bedtime finishing a chapter, and I walked by his room and saw the light under the door and let him be. I celebrated the Saturday morning he asked me to teach him to make biscuits, and we stood at the counter for 2 hours getting it wrong and then getting it right and eating them warm with butter and honey at noon, like we had nowhere else to, or wasn't, because we didn't. People say that at my age, taking on a child is too much. They say it with pity, like I have done something foolish. What they do not understand is that a man who spent 31 years looking at what happens when the wrong people protect the wrong interests knows exactly what a good one looks like. And protecting Daniel is not a burden. It is the clearest mission I have had since I put down my badge. He is 12 now. He has a new rescue inhaler and a full prescription and a follow-up appointment every 3 months. He is reading books that his teachers have never heard of and explaining them to me with a patience that makes me think he might become something extraordinary. He is starting to leave his shoes in the middle of the floor sometimes, which is aggravating, and which I would not trade for anything. Last week he asked me if he was going to be okay. I turned from the stove and looked at him. He was sitting at the kitchen table with his homework in front of him, not looking at me, asking it the way you ask a question when you are not sure you want the answer. "You are going to be better than okay," I said. "And I have been wrong about some things in my life, Daniel, but not about this." He nodded slowly. He looked back at his homework. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. Some debts cannot be repaid. The years that are taken from a child cannot be returned. The trust that is broken in those early rooms, in those dark houses, in those refrigerators locked by the people who should have filled them, that trust does not simply come back because a judge signs a paper or a mother says she is sorry. It comes back in millimeters, over months, in the way a child eventually forgets to brace himself when he asks for a second serving, in the way he stops apologizing for being hungry. I am 67 years old, and I have outlived my wife and my assumptions about my family and any illusion I had that love is enough if it is not also honest. I have learned that the most important thing a person can carry is not a badge or a title or a financial cushion or a plan. It is the willingness to show up in the dark when a child calls, and to mean it, and to keep meaning it every morning after. I am Gerald Marsh. I am a grandfather. I am a guardian. And I do not leave people behind. If this story found you at the right moment, if it reminded you of someone who needed you or someone who showed up for you, I want to hear about it in the comments. Tell me where you are watching from. And if you believe that family is built not by blood but by the choice to keep showing up, hit that like button and subscribe, because these stories are worth telling, and the people in them deserve to be seen.